Welcome to Hardware Asylum. In this video we're going to be diving into the Ninjalane Hardware Vault. If you've been following Hardware Asylum, you'll know that I am the editor-in-chief of HardwareAsylum.com, and before that, Ninjalane.com. Ninjalane is still the company name, we just rebranded. And during those early years, Soltek was one of the companies that would send me motherboards to review all the time. And since I like motherboards so much, I ended up keeping a lot of them. So we're going to be diving back in through the vault and kind of looking at some of these old boards, some of the marketing on the boxes, and really what made them special and why I wanted to keep them. Here we have a Soltek motherboard. At the top, you notice that we have the Matrix font. This says mainboard. Matrix was a popular movie during that era. And in this box we have the Soltek SL-75DRV4 Purple Ray. This is a VIA-based Athlon XP motherboard, purple PCB. And inside we have the cover and a whole lot of stuff that is not the motherboard. I don't know what's going on here. I mean, we got hard drive covers, hard drives. Oh, we have some manuals. That's nice. Soltek manual. Oh, we got another Soltek. Well, wait a minute. I know where that board is. Now, it is not every day that you have a computer that you built that comes back. And here I give you a vintage 2002, 2003 computer. It's not beige. We have a black chassis, which is nice. This is a machine that I built for a family member, and they were cleaning out their storage unit and said, hey, do you want any of this stuff? And I said, sure, bring it by, we'll take a look. The case is really nothing special. We have a silver face, a nice chrome detail at the bottom, USB ports on front. I'm pretty sure I put the DVD drive in here, but they needed to have a burner, so there's a TDK CD burner in there. Chassis itself is badass black because we had already started moving away from the beige box in the 2000s. Now, you know a system was built by a hardware enthusiast when you have 80mm Sunon fans installed with nice metal grills, and the metal has been dremelled out to give you the best possible airflow. I have you on the tripod here, so we're going to do the big reveal. Side panel comes off. So there's our Soltek motherboard in its purple glory. I was a huge fan of Hercules graphics cards and peripherals. So we have a Hercules GeForce 3, I think it's a TI-200. And down at the bottom we have a Hercules Muse XL, which was a really popular sound card. And the two green cards, that's the Ethernet and modem. Nothing too special there. In the back, I don't know if you can see it, but we have Corsair DDR memory. During this era, I was also reviewing a lot of Corsair products. And at the time, it was really the best memory you could buy. It was a little bit more expensive, but they were the new kids on the block and they were trying to make a name for themselves. So let's go ahead and tear this machine down. I want to get that motherboard out of there. Here's our graphics card, Hercules. Blue, awesome heatsinks, overclocked. Some of the best cards you could buy during the time. Here's that sound card, the Muse XL, right there by my pinky. From Hercules, I believe this is a CM Media based sound card. Really simple, it's all self-contained on the chip. Standard outputs. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this network card is a Linksys. Hey, what do you know? It's a Linksys. That was all the network cards I was using at the time. I have no idea about the modem. Here, your standard dial-up modem. I'm kind of glad we don't use these things anymore. Cable management in the early 2000s was not really a thing, but you got extra points if you did some zip ties around your cables to kind of keep them out of the way. Now, if you read articles from enthusiasts like myself in the early 2000s building machines, we will have told you needed to have the best cooling, so you added extra fans, and you dremelled out holes. You did your cable routing. You might have also rounded a ribbon cable, just to provide a little bit more space for air to get from one place to the other. But I'm here to tell you nowadays it probably really didn't matter, and all it really did was just added a lot of noise. But those sorts of things are what laid the groundwork for the airflow chassis we have now, the much better coolers that we have now, the improved power supplies we have now. It all came out of us building machines back in the early 2000s. So you're welcome. And now the motherboard's free. And here we have the Soltek SL-75DRV4. There were several versions of the VIA-based motherboards, and this just happens to be one that supports Athlon XP, socket A. There's the Corsair DDR memory with the silver heat spreaders. There was a Crucial module added afterwards. We have AGB Pro, which supported more powerful graphics cards. We have 5 PCI slots and a media port at the bottom, which there was only a few cards that actually got supported there, and I never saw any of them. Onboard IDE supported ATA 133, which is quite fast at the time. Here's a Soltek branded chipset fan with some cable management around the existing capacitors. And you'll notice that every one of the capacitors is leaking. Unfortunately, that was a common problem of motherboards of this generation, and it started one of the greatest marketing movements ever in motherboard design, which is all Japanese capacitors. And motherboards would advertise this with the intent that buyers will pick up their board because they do not want to have leaky Chinese capacitors exploding on their motherboard. The cooler is an actual very popular unit. This is the Thermosonic Thermo Engine. And as you can see from the side, we have vertical fins. And underneath the heatsink, it looks like an X. In the very center of it is a hollow core. And the idea was that it would act a little bit like a heat pipe and move heat up the center channel and allow it to be cooled by the 60mm fan on top. The concept was extremely cool, and it worked really quite well. Although 60mm fans were very, very noisy, and you couldn't really do much about that because to get any efficiency out of them, they had to spin fast. Regardless, the Thermo engine was one of the best coolers you could get for the Athlon XP, which is why I selected it for this build. Now, I don't have a hard drive, but we can fire this up on the bench, check out the BIOS settings. You can witness the power. You can witness the power of the 60mm Delta Screamer. I don't think this is a Delta. It might be a Global Win. Either way, it's not very quiet. But by golly, it cools extremely well. I remember some of the custom cases that you could buy from well-known e-tailers, because these were pre-mods that they did themselves. At the very top, instead of doing like a 120mm blowhole, because 120mm fans were not very common, they put two 60mm fans side by side. Had them exhausting out the top in the traditional blowhole configuration, and it just multiplied the amount of noise. It's kind of interesting, really. Here's an interesting bit of trivia. These dip switches were to control hardware-based overclocking, but Soltek had pioneered a BIOS that would allow you to change the frequencies in the BIOS. They called it Red Storm overclocking. So you didn't necessarily need to flip these switches to control the clocks. You could do it from the BIOS, but if you wanted to be hardcore, you could flip the switches and experiment with trying to get the system to run without the BIOS actually being engaged. I talked a lot about the Thermosonic Thermo Engine. It attaches using the tabs on the socket. Around the socket, though, there are holes that go through the PCB. The socket A was one of the first that supported board-mounted heat sinks. The heat sinks were really difficult to find, but when you did find them, they were extremely large and they worked extremely well at not cracking the cores on the Athlon XP. Alright, let's see if we can find the right pin to start this. There we go. So look at that. Standard award BIOS. When I did these reviews before, I would take a photo of the screen and put that with the article. Nowadays you can just hit F12 and keep a copy of the BIOS screen. But this would allow you to see what I see and what kind of things you can change. So for instance, here we have the DRAM clock. We can set it by SPD, or we can override it depending on what modules we have installed. Looks like the timings were set to manual. Cast latency of 2.5. Now the date was wrong, so I think the CMOS battery might have expired. Integrated peripherals, we have the VIA IDE and PCI. Smart Dock anti-burn shield. This was their temperature monitoring and voltage monitoring. And it looks like our voltages are a bit low across the board. Here's the frequency and voltage control. This was Red Storm overclocking. So you can press enter and that will auto overclock the system. In addition to Red Storm overclocking, we have all of the controls that we would normally expect. So we can set the CPU vCore. These are overclock settings. We can set the various SKUs, and this changes the phase of the timing on the chips so that overclocking can actually be attained in some cases. And we can also set the front side bus or the CPU clock between 133 and 200. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. What would you like me to do with this motherboard? I mean, obviously I can send it to the recycler, I can put it back in the original box and put it on the shelf. But if I do keep it, I would like to do a cap repair. So if you'd like to see that process, let me know. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.